Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jake Freivald, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Coleman McCormick to talk about capturing, correcting, and communicating geospatial data with Fulcrum. At Fulcrum here, I'm the VP of Product Marketing, which means I talk about all the stuff that we do, and Coleman is the Vice President of Product, which means he does all the stuff we talk about. So between the two of us, hopefully we'll have a pretty good session. We're going to do a number of things today, including about probably 20 minutes worth of presentation, about another 20 minutes worth of demo, and then plenty of time left over for Q&A. So please do start to ask those questions in the GoToWebinar interface as we get going, and we're very excited to take your questions. The goal today is very straightforward. We're going to see how Fulcrum helps you get the higher quality geospatial data you need from the field. With that in mind, let's get started. We'll start off by how we capture information. Now, I'm going to talk about a lot of things, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of what we do, and Coleman will actually demonstrate a fair amount of those things in his section. But I'm going to start off with the capturing data part by, of course, being out in the field. And the first thing I want to talk about is capturing point data, since it's the simplest use case. There are a number of different ways that we automatically capture information about points. One of them is inside the records themselves, such as when you're standing in the field taking a record, then you will, in most cases, be automatically geostamped with the location at which you're standing. You can also preload data with points in Fulcrum. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But if you're capturing a record, it's very easy to make sure that you're automatically capturing a point data in the field. Photos are automatically also geostamped. One of the things that we are that we do extremely well is provide this information in a way that is consumable for people. So what you see here is the picture that was taken of a telephone pole right outside my house. It's probably one of the most photographed poles in Huntington Station, New York. And you can see the direction I was facing on the right-hand side and where I was standing. That's right outside my house. So you can see I was pointing basically, west, northwest. That's automatically done. There's nothing I need to do about it. You simply just have to allow Fulcrum, check the box that says Fulcrum's going to geostamp your photographs. In addition, we will take geostamps of the record edits that we do. So if I'm out in the field taking pictures of things, and then I go back in and I edit the record that I am working on, you will see where I was standing when I did that. So if you've got somebody who's out, and they decide that they're going to edit the record when they're 2 miles away, you'll be able to see that in the audit trail that's here within the record that we're looking at. This happens to be the same record that we were talking about, that you saw the geostamping of before. So you can see each of the geometries that I had associated with the point that I was taking, the picture that I was taking, the record where I was standing, and you can see the latitude and longitude of those locations. All right, so that's capturing point data in the field. What about something that's a little bit more interesting, like a geospatial track? Well, you can do that very easily. One of the things that we want to do is, if we just have our camera on and we want to be able to follow along with a video of where we are moving, then we want to be able to have that as a very easy checkbox option within Fulcrum. So what you see here is what you would actually see within the app builder if you've got a video field. All you need to do is click that GPS track enabled button, and you'll be able to, or checkbox I should say, and you'll be able to get the kind of track that looks like this when you actually look at the record. And to make that a little bit more real, I just want to show you one that you can actually look at and share if you want to right now. I'm going to zoom over to the fulcrumapp.com homepage and show you exactly where you can find this out, right? So this is the homepage. If you go to Explore Fulcrum and go to our geospatial capabilities page, you can come down here just a little bit to where it says integrate geospatial data in both directions. And you see on this button where it says see a geostamped video. Let's open up that video. And here you can actually see the video that I took while I was driving around. It's got audio. I'm going to turn the audio off so you don't hear me talking through it. But you can actually drag where you want to go. Okay, I was here. I'm here at this video stamped point. I'm going to stop this and see if I made a rolling stop or did a proper stop at the stop sign. Of course, naturally did a rolling stop. Sorry about that. You can check on people to see if they were being safe when they were driving, all those kinds of good things. So this geo-stamped or geo-tracked video option is just a simple checkbox to enable it. And then you can share this with anybody who needs to see that, generally speaking, just by enabling data shares on this app. So that's one way to use tracked data within Fulcrum. Another thing that we can do is capture geospatial data directly in the field. So here I have a line or a polygon that I want to capture, and all I need to do is create the geometry. So if you see on the right-hand side there, I've got a new record and it says create geometry on it. If I click that create geometry, and you'll see Coleman do this later, then you can select on the map where the lines and the polygons need to be. So it's very easy to do that. On the other hand, you can also, if you'd like, oh, I'm sorry, yes, it's also worth noticing, you can select whether you want advanced geometries associated with each record. In other words, each record itself has a single line or polygon associated with it. Or if you have a repeatable section, you can also have lines or polygons associated with each element in a repeatable section. So either one of those works, and it's easy to get the kind of geometry that you need for the kind of data that you're collecting. And in any of those cases, you're really just clicking create geometry to make that happen. The other thing that I'd like to show is that you can also do lines and polygons by using your GPS, using a feature called GPS tracking. And in that case, I'm going to show you an excerpt from a demo video. The link to both this video, demo video, and to the car tracking one that I showed you just briefly ahead of time, the video tracking one, both of those are in the GoToWebinar interface. You should be able to click on those and find those if you're interested. Anyway, this starts about a minute into the demo itself. You can see that I've already been walking around and creating a track just by walking. And if you notice here, I'm going to do some movement to a section where I can't see what's going on. So I pause the recording. If you see in the upper right-hand side of the screen there, the recording is stopped. I walk around the area that I have a hard time with and do a little Benny Hill number here to speed it up. And when I get to the point where I want to start recording again, I hit record in the upper right again, and Fulcrum will connect the dots. And then, of course, the video shows the fact that I've completed the rest of it. So the full video, again, is available as a link in the GoToWebinar interface. I encourage you to go out and look at that if you're interested in simple geo-tracking for people to create a line or a polygon just basically by walking around. Okay, so those are multiple ways for us to capture geospatial directly in the field, and people use that for a host of different scenarios. We've talked to customers who are using it to walk the line between one manhole and another. We've had people suggest that they would use it for tracking a downed power line during an emergency situation. That's something we actually built a demo around because it's a great use case. But we've had customers use these for a variety of different kinds of use cases. And anytime you need to capture a line or a polygon and associate that with data, this is a great way to do it in Fulcrum. Okay, we talked about now the ability to capture information. Let's take just a couple of minutes to talk about how we're going to correct information that is captured. And again, I want to start off by correcting geospatial information in the field. And what's interesting about this is there are a number of use cases where the whole purpose is to ensure that corrections are possible. In other words, part of the reason for sending people out into the field is to correct the data that's there. So one of the most common use cases we see in Fulcrum is the preloading of shapefiles. And when you take an export of some geodatabase and generate a lot of shapefiles from it and upload those shapefiles into Fulcrum, which is not a complex process to do, then you have the opportunity to have each of those individual shapefiles associated with its relevant data to be corrected by people who have boots on the ground. So some of the potential use cases for this might be, as you see here, lead service lines. It's a mandate right now that by October of 2024, municipalities and water utilities and so on will have an inventory of all of the service lines in their responsibility area that have lead or potential for lead poisoning in them, and they need to ensure that they have a full inventory of all of those things and associated fixtures and so on. Well, in that case, very often what they're dealing with is that the areas that are most likely to have those lead service lines in them are also the least likely to have modern, up-to-date digitized information. So they're literally scraping information off of 50-year-old paper cards in some cases and trying to get that information into a GIS in some way. And in that, naturally speaking, that's just going to be a recipe for a lot of data errors. And so one of the things that you can do is if you're working with Fulcrum to do lead service line remediation or inventories, you can go out and ensure that you're capturing the right information and correcting the information that's in these uploads to ensure that you get the right kind of information, the right geospatial information corrected within that use case, within that set of requirements. Another important one is pole inspections. We do a ton of pole inspections. Osmos is one of our major customers. There are a lot of municipalities and other organizations that use us for pole inspections. And you'll find situations where they should have good information. They actually have a GIS database that contains the pole locations, but sometimes the pole location didn't get updated when there was some kind of an incident. Maybe there was a fire, maybe there was a car accident, and the pole got replaced. And when it was replaced, it was put somewhere a little bit different from where it was before. And that has a lot of implications, right? It could mean that, for example, the tree cover that you think is okay actually isn't okay because your pole is 5 meters closer to the tree line than you thought it was when you were initially doing your scan of that area. So making sure that when people are doing pole inspections, they get good information, solid geospatial information is a really critical element of correcting geospatial data in the field. And then finally, as you can see here on the facility, sometimes, pardon me, on the screenshot, sometimes a facility gets expanded, and if that information isn't put into the GIS specifically, then you won't see that that footprint is expanded. It's very easy within Fulcrum to edit that, either by doing what you see here, which is actually changing the shape file, changing the shape in Fulcrum, or again, doing that kind of walk around the facility to make sure that you get the outline correct. So those are some very, very common use cases, most of which start with preloading information into Fulcrum and then sending people out into the field. In many cases, what we're trying to do with geospatial data is not correct the geospatial nature of the data itself. In other words, we're not trying to change the line itself, definitely, but we may be trying to change the data attributes of it. Where the facility footprint was expanded, there's now additional information about that facility that might need to be captured. Maybe there's other ongoing activities there. Maybe the number of personnel who are allowed to be on location there has changed. There might be some information that needs to be fixed there as well. As you see with poles, maybe a pole was replaced with metal and it has a wood attribute. So you need to actually say, no, it's now a metal pole. So very often we're also not just correcting the geospatial data, in other words, the line, point, or polygon itself, but we're changing the data associated with that geometry. And then finally, one of the things that frequently happens is if a field worker is out in the field using, let's say, a feature service layer that's in Esri. So in other words, they're getting information on their device that is related to a feature service layer, pardon me, that's related to a layer in Esri. That layer may have some slight inaccuracies in it. And if someone is in the field, they need to be able to nominate changes to those geometries. Now, I don't necessarily want them to be able to change those geometries themselves, right? This is something where I don't necessarily have a GIS expert there. This is not someone who has responsibility for that geospatial data themselves. They're not a GIS expert. But we do want to make sure that if they see a discrepancy, maybe there's a telephone pole or a power pole that's inside a parcel when it is shown in the layer to be outside the parcel, maybe they need to nominate some kind of correction. So they can make an observation, capture the appropriate geometry, and then based on that observation, they can push that information back to someone who then looks at it and makes a determination about what they should actually do with respect to that. Should they correct the feature in ArcGIS, or maybe they should say, no, the original feature in ArcGIS is correct and there's an error on behalf of the person in the field. One way or the other, that is captured, a record of it is made, and somebody can follow through with it based on the activity in the field. So those are some of the things we think about correcting geospatial data in the field. Common use cases when we're correcting geospatial data on the web. Now, obviously, we're talking about someone back at an office. Every record or repeatable is available for editing, and they'll simply modify points of an existing geometry. Sometimes it's to get better accuracy. The person in the field grabs something that's close to the right shape of what they're looking for, but maybe this was a rectangle when they did the power station, and they needed to actually follow the exact contour of that power station because they want a better area calculation or something like that. You can even completely remove the geometry associated with a record and convert it from a point to a polygon or vice versa. And you can see the changes. Again, it's really important to note that you can see the changes here. Any of the edits that get made within the record are going to be auditable within the Fulcrum interface itself. So that's the capture part and the correct part. And now I'd like to talk just very briefly about the communicate part. Communicate is a lot less glamorous to show because it's not nearly as visual. We're talking about taking information and pushing it out to different kinds of people. So what I did is I created a chart here that really shows something that I think is fairly obvious, right? There are things that are conceptually simple, but they're a little bit harder to do. They're a little bit more work you've got to do. You don't get as much value out of the integration that you're doing. And then there are things that are more sophisticated and take a lot more setup perhaps to do, but then when they work, they add a lot of value just because they just make stuff happen. And so that's captured on the left-hand side of the screen. And the 4 things that I like to talk about here are data exports, email and SMS, webhooks, and API calls. And what the right-hand side of the screen shows with respect to those 4 things is what they're used for. So for example, if you need to capture the geospatial information in Fulcrum from a single app, let's say we're doing an observations app, so anybody who is making corrections to geometries reports that geometry in the observation app, and I need to get all of the geometries out of that. I can do a pull, a download of those as say shapefiles, and when I do that, I'm asking for that typically manually. When I get that information manually, I'm then able to do something with it. I'm able to upload it somewhere else, massage the data, do something with it. So a little bit more manual work, but very simple conceptually, easy to do, and it's it's kind of on demand. When I want to push information out from Fulcrum to a person, frequently that's going to be done using email and SMS. So that's a push where something happens in Fulcrum. Maybe there's a hazard that's seen. An observation is actually a hazard and not just a geometry. I see a hazard and I want someone to know about that hazard immediately. So I send them a text message via SMS with some of the data about it. That push is an event-driven push, and I can give a location of where the hazard is occurring. Same kind of thing for webhooks, except instead of talking to people, now I'm talking to a machine. I'm sending this out to another app. I'm sending it out to a business process management tool, whatever it may be. Some system has to react to whatever it is that's going on. Those are both then event-driven. Some trigger, some fact about the data cause those things to occur, and when it happens, Fulcrum will push that information out to the person or system that needs it. And then finally, API calls are the most sophisticated in general because you can do almost anything. Like we have customers doing incredible things. We've got one customer that used to go set up a series of Fulcrum apps anytime they would go out and do construction in typically third world countries. So very complex situations that require a lot of thought and planning. And what they did instead is they said, okay, we're going to capture some information about the kind of thing that we are trying to do, and then we're going to use API calls to automatically generate all of the different Fulcrum apps that need to happen. That's the level of sophistication that the APIs can give you. For geospatial information specifically, all of that information is available within the API. So you can either call Fulcrum when you need something from Fulcrum, pull that information out by an API call, or if you want Fulcrum to do something specific and send that out to a system, you can have Fulcrum do that too. So that can be a push from Fulcrum out to other platforms. Again, this is typically event-driven. Either the system wants something or the system needs something, or Fulcrum needs to send something out, and whatever it is about the data that makes that a requirement, something just completed, some set of data just became available, whatever it is, that's what causes the API to trigger and then send or receive that information. So like I said, not the most glamorous thing to look at, but actually some of the most valuable things that Fulcrum does, and some of the reasons that people come to Fulcrum most are encapsulated in this slide. Just the amount of integration that's possible to make things happen in ways that wouldn't be able to happen otherwise. So with that, I feel like I've talked enough and I've come to the end of my slides. So what I would like to do now is hand the floor over to Coleman, who will be able to take over somehow. I can't actually see the interface right now. So if we can switch the interface over to Coleman, he'll be able to share his screen and start talking about, start showing you how Fulcrum actually does this stuff in the real world. I'm not hearing anybody. So Coleman, are you there?
No, I'm here.
Stop sharing, Jake.
I need to stop sharing? Okay, sorry, the thing wasn't showing. Here we go. Sorry, I can't see the interface when it's when I'm screen sharing, so that's why I couldn't see what was going on there. I apologize.
if you make me the presenter, I can share mine. But to get started here, I'll just to introduce myself. My name is Coleman. I'm on the product team here at Fulcrum, and I'm going to walk through some of what Fulcrum can do. I'm going to tie back as much as possible to a lot of what Jake talked about, so that it makes sense, and we can put a visual to a lot of the descriptions Jake was giving you there. A lot of good stuff here, and I think it's helpful to see a lot of this functionality in the context of an actual workflow, an actual use case. So what we've done here is I've got a couple of use cases. These are like water utility examples. So Jake mentioned earlier the lead service line inventory as an example use case that folks are using Fulcrum for. So I've got that example, and I've got one showing manhole inspections. It'll just kind of show two like slightly distinct kinds of data collection, and show off some of these line and polygon kind of GIS functionality that Fulcrum has nowadays. So to kick it off, I will go in. Let's look at our lead service line inventory. This is one that we've built out, and it should be available in our app gallery also. If you wanted to take a look for yourself, you can add this to your own Fulcrum account. This is a survey we built out that modeled on the EPA guidelines for lead service line programs. So we basically matched the schema that the EPA guidelines suggest for how to conduct these kinds of projects. So if I were to scroll down, obviously this is a fairly extensive survey, but it goes into some detail about the property itself and the address information, homeowner or property owner information, and then an extensive inventory of the actual state of the system at that location. So what's on the utility side, what's on the property owner side, who owns what's in violation, what's not, and that sort of thing. And this is actually a data set of lines, GIS data set. So this example shows what, and actually both of these examples in a way, what Jake talked about with respect to creating new records, creating new data versus being able to import and update content. So in a lot of inventory examples, you already have a pre-existing asset library, right, or GIS data set of your assets. And perhaps they're just out of date. You need to go out, you need to update them, you need to update the attributes, slightly adjust the geometry, the location, not necessarily create something from scratch. So in both of these cases, I've sort of mocked up data sets to represent these. But here's our manhole inspection model, much simpler, but goes through some basics about inspection information, structure materials, construction type, sizes, and then the various details about each pipe connection coming into that manhole. So this is the kind of thing you'd see in a typical utility kind of storm sewer network inventory project. I'll back up here. Let's look real quick while I'm here at what this looks like before we flip over to the mobile app and see more of what a field user would see. So this is how we're set up. This data set just represents the service connections from the street, from the water main to the home. And what we're going to do, or what I have a field team doing, is going house to house and conducting these inspections at the meter box or wherever the service connection is to do the lead service line inventory. And so as they go down, they'll walk, around the neighborhood, open up each box, do their inspection. And as they go through the form, there's a status field. That's what the color represents. Each of the yellow ones is new. Green ones are completed and okay, clear of lead. Red ones, lead's present. Basic use case here, just kind of simplified to show you what Fulcrum can do. But what I did want to show here is we also can connect to your ArcGIS.com account. And here I'm already connected to my ArcGIS environment. And so the layers, map layers, will show data sets or layers that I have added to Fulcrum, or layers that are available in my ArcGIS environment. So you can see here, here's an example of one that's in my environment, and I've got a couple here, water mains, sewers, sewer lines that I can turn on. And then I've got actually an imagery data set of custom imagery that I want to use. So I can flip those on. The light blue is my drinking water mains, and then the dotted line is the sewer line. So I can see this here on the web, and it'll be represented just like this when I go out in the field on my iPad or iPhone or what have you, doing the field work. Those, in my use case, these are not data sets that are going to be updated or modified by my team, but they can see them, they can see where they are, and be able to connect anything they need to adjust. They can connect back to that main geometry and be able to see it. Similarly, if I go to my manhole inspections app, we'll see these are points. So if I turn back on my other layers, oh, they're underneath. Why aren't you loading? Yeah, it's not loading for some reason. That's okay. But you can see the manhole points, and I'll go look at those on the mobile as well. So now let's flip over to my mobile app, and we'll look at how the mobile field workflow works. We'll switch to this. As you can see, we're looking here at, I've got manhole inspections, I've got lead service line inventory, I've got my two separate apps assigned to my field user. So when they go into their lead service line inventory, they can see all those laterals they've got to go out to survey. So if I zoom in, I can pick on one. Let's say I'm here, and I want to conduct a survey. This, when we do what we're doing here, where we've preloaded data, we've preloaded it primarily to get the geometry in there, so you can see where the line is, where that asset is. But along with that could come the existing information you have. In my example here, some of this is not populated, but in a realistic example, you'd more than likely have a lot of this already in your data set, right? So the utility owner name, contact info, that kind of stuff would come from data that you already know. And if I open up one of these, it's got some more of the address information populated. Oops, it's not one. One down here, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go back to the incomplete one. But let's say, so the form here, I won't go into the gory details on the form itself because it's quite extensive. But user goes out, they can conduct the full survey, and when they're done, they mark it complete, and it actually updates the symbology to represent that it's completed. So they can watch themselves kind of go around the block, and each time they sync, right, they sync this up, that can even be configured to be real time. So as they're doing things, it's going back up to the server. Someone back in the office can be seeing those changes happen as they're happening. So if, you know, in midstream, field team does something incorrect, someone's doing QA, QC back in the office, they can almost in real time say, hey, we got to go back and redo this. This piece isn't complete. Whatever, the feedback loop can be tightened down quite a bit as work is being done. One of the things I did want to look at was, here's one with the address. So this one is one that's more complete. So there's even photos in there for house location as they, if I have one that's not done yet. So let's say my example here, you see this house is not connected. Maybe that's new construction. Maybe that wasn't there the last time we updated the data. I can say create a new record, hit this locate button at the bottom, and say create geometry. Now I can go to my house that's not connected yet, and I can actually add this service connection, hit done, and now my inspection has that geometry. So now when I go back, now I do my inspection just like normal, save it, and there it is. We've got a new feature. Similarly, like Jake was talking about the case of updating or correcting what's incorrect. In my example, I've got one over here that's wacky, like that's not where it's supposed to be. I can tap on that, I can open it up back to that locate, and this one gives me an edit geometry option when it already exists. I can go over to the existing point and say move that point that's actually supposed to be connected here to that house. Boom, had the point done. And now we've updated that. So you can do either use case, right? You can update something that already exists, or you can append new geometries, new records onto your GIS data. And I'm not going to show it in here, that Jake showed it in video form, but if I was to create a new record, go to my create geometry view, the record button up in the top corner right there, that will let me start moving and describing that geometry by moving around with my device using the GPS. So that's just another way to basically create those features. Now let me go back to my manhole inspection example. And so these are at each kind of point along the storm sewer. I can open one up, inspected by myself. It's auto-populating the date and time. We can just go down and fill out our form here. So you can see how quickly it is, how quickly it can happen that you're, filling out your form info. There's a number field, another number field. So this one too has quite a few fields. I'm not going to spend time going through every one of them, but now I can say it was opened and inspected, mark it complete. Up in the top corner, you'll see the 4 there. That means we've got 4 edits that have happened here locally on my device. 4 records have changes unsynced only on my device. If I hit sync now, it's going to push all those changes back up to the cloud, where we can then flip back over to our web browser and take a look at that. And there's one thing I did want to point out, if it wasn't evident when I did it before. When I was on my map and if I go to layers, I'm not even sure I opened this because I think they were already on. But if I go to layers here, my iPhone, my Fulcrum mobile app at the bottom there, you can see is connected to my ArcGIS environment. So here, just like we did on the web, I can see on the Fulcrum web, you can see all the same layers here on mobile. So I can toggle on and off these main and sewer layers, and those are loading over the air from my ArcGIS instance. Now I will flip back to the browser to show a number of other things here. So let's open up the lead service line inventory, and now you can see there's the one that I corrected over to the correct house. There's the one that I added. Just like we did on the mobile, we can do the same thing here. Turn these back on. We can do the same thing on the web. If we had a property that wasn't properly connected, we can create a record, and we can say, let's say this service line goes this direction. We can create that geometry. And maybe I don't even want to have this inspected yet. I want that to go out to the field for someone to update it. I can say, just create, and it'll create a new a new record for them to go and complete. Same thing, we can go back in, we can edit, so we can move this pre-existing, we can add, you know, details to it, whatever. Submit the change, now it's updated. So that kind of thing, we're seeking to have, you know, full parity in behavior between the mobile app and what the field team would be able to do and what an office, you know, kind of back office review staff would be able to do. So that if minor edits need to be made, or, you know, cosmetic changes, spelling mistakes, anything like that, someone can open up an inspection here and go make minor changes if they're needed, right? Let's update the phone number, it was incorrect, whatever it is, right? So they can save that. And then at any time, I can kind of open up and see a history of changes to that record. If I have, you know, a suspicion that something was wrong, or that used to be correct and someone overwrote my changes, I can go in here and I can see each version as that thing changes over time. Let's see, what else I need to review. Oh, one thing we want to look at is something we call shared views. So what this lets you do, this I think threads into the kind of communicate phase of our kind of three-step or three-phase process, is right here. I've already created one. A view in Fulcrum is a collection of basically filters. So I can go into each of these columns and I can like filter by values and say only the ones updated by Coleman, and it'll filter the data, right? So I can do that across all these fields. I can hide things, I can show things, and then save a view, and that will persist that particular view of content over time. So you don't have to go in there and do that each time. What you then can do additionally is, let me clear my clear filters. There we go. Go back to my view. I can create a shared view, as we call it in Fulcrum. So its name is this, all LSL inspections. I can get the data shared out in these various formats, but one is a feature service. So when I grab that URL, I can then flip over to my, whoops, that's not what I want. I can flip to my ArcGIS environment, and in here, what this feature lets you do is view your Fulcrum data live as a layer in your ArcGIS Online environment. So here, the two blue line layers for my different pipe networks are native in my AGOL account. The points, though, those are manholes in this case, my other app that I was looking at. The manholes data is being read live from Fulcrum. Fulcrum's hosting the feature service. Esri ArcGIS is viewing it here. So in that way, you can bring in, you can kind of pipe in the live updated, the field updated content straight into an Esri dashboard for situational awareness, reporting, whatever you might want to do that incorporates that data. You can join it with other data. You can do a lot there that you can do in the full ArcGIS Online environment that Fulcrum doesn't do, right? That involves analytics and post-processing. If I now go, I can actually pick on one of these. I didn't grab the point. I can't click on it, but I think it might be because it's underneath something else. But you can look at the data as it's changing over time here in ArcGIS, and it's as easy as this. So if I go to layers and I hit add layer from URL, I just give it that service URL I grabbed from Fulcrum, and it detects it, add it to the map, and it'll bring it in as a layer here, and it brings over the symbology as well. So the colors represent the statuses, just like we were looking at in Fulcrum. This doesn't yet support line and polygon data that are native to Fulcrum over here, but that's something that's coming in the near-term roadmap. So let's see. One other thing I did want to look at was the workflows. Jake talked about in the kind of chart that shows different ways to get data out of Fulcrum. One of the ways that we find a lot of use cases for is our workflows feature. So if I go back out to my dashboard here, and I go to workflows on this lead service line inventory app, I have a notification workflow I've set up to notify an email address every time an inspection's done where lead was present in the inspection. So a simple example, but if I were to look at the logic of this, it's set up so that, and this workflows functionality kind of supports a trigger, filter, action model. A certain set of criteria trigger it to run. It passes through a filter, whatever case makes it through that filter, do the action, right? So if we walk through this, every time a record's created or updated, where the status is equal to lead present, which was one of my statuses in my form, do this action. So send an email to this email address with this subject line and this body, and you can insert in there data values from the actual inspection data. In this case, this is going to send an email, but we can also support SMS messages, but webhooks as well. Webhooks would let you send the raw data out to another system. So if you want to consume that data into another application, so say you have your own custom databases or something like that, we have customers that will set up these workflows so that every time a piece of data reaches a completed state, like it makes it all the way through the workflows, the states to a completed status, send a webhook with the full data content and store it in my SQL Server database or whatever, wherever you might want to put it, right? So that's the workflows feature, and there's a lot of flexibility here. We can add compound filters. We can change the trigger to happen when only on the original create versus it being updated as well. And this is something we're interested in expanding onto to support other kinds of actions that one might want to complete. And that, I think, about does it, unless Jake, you think I'm missing anything here? Anything worth diving deeper on?
I think we're covered, and we've got some questions, so we should get to those before signing off. We got about 15 minutes left for questions, so if you're up for that, then we'll just start that. This is the part of the show that I really enjoy the most because I get to ask Coleman a lot of things, and I don't have to answer that much, or if I do, it's really easy. So Coleman, here you go. You ready? We got about 6 questions stacked up so far. Please do send in as additional questions. We'll ask as many as we can get through in the period of time. We answered some more offline. If you got stuff that you need to ask offline, please feel free to do that as well. And we had at least one person join the beta program while you were speaking, Coleman, so that's pretty awesome as well. Let's start with something from Paul, who asks, can you add an external GPS antenna to give a more accurate point location?
Yes, you can. The answer beyond that depends on the device. Most Bluetooth-based GPS units can be paired with devices Fulcrum supports, Android phones, iPhones, and they basically override the onboard sensor using mock locations on Android, and I think it just silently does it on iOS. And that's something too that we're actually in the midst of working on some more direct integration with some of the specific GPS manufacturers to make that even more even better than it is already.
Yeah, and Michael actually had a similar question, and he specifically mentions Trimble, and it's worth mentioning that Trimble is one of those organizations that we're talking to right now about that integration. So
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of people are finding a lot of value in those high resolution GPSs, and we are definitely, we already can do that in many cases, but we're definitely moving to making that even easier for other people. Indri asks, are the map layers available in the field if there's no internet connection?
Oh, that's a good question. So yes, we have a format we've supported for a long time to build your own offline maps called MB tiles. So that's one method, but the more modern method that we're finding a lot of power in, this comes with our kind of port over to using Esri's platform, is the ability to download the feature services offline while you're connected. So you can basically pre-download either the base map or the feature service before you disconnect, and then it'll stay kind of cached on your device. So yes, but once you're offline, the ones that I was using there in my demo, if I was fully disconnected, that wouldn't work, right? It wouldn't be able to reach out to the server and find them.
Wouldn't be able to reach out to the server, but once you've cached them, you can disconnect and then go offline and use them. So you just have to remember to make sure you've got them on board first.
Correct.
There's
Yes.
if you go to the mobile device, Indri, and you look at base maps, one of the things that you can do is select an area to keep a base map for, and you can download those to your device and have them available for use offline just that way. So yes, you can do that. If you need new information, then obviously getting new information is going to be something you need to go using a live connection for. Great. Continue to ask questions, please. We've got plenty of time. Coleman, one person asked here, can I see the attributes in Fulcrum of a geometry that's in a feature service layer, or only the geometry itself? Can I see the attributes in Fulcrum of a geometry that's in a feature service layer, or can I only see the geometry itself?
That's a good question. Yes, you can see the attributes. You can't yet do something with those attributes, but they're viewable. So if I was to go in here, if you can still see my screen here. Let me turn this back on. Like I had this mains data. If I click on this feature, this doesn't have anything associated with it. It's just an ID. It has no attributes, but you can click on a feature and it'll give you this preview with the attributes. So that's there on the web interface and on the mobile app. You can do that. And one of the things I was mentioning that we're looking to do is figure out how to incorporate better ways to make something with that data. So basically, be able to build logic, like if I'm doing a lateral inspection like I'm showing, automatically grab the ID from the connected pipe and put it on the form, like that kind of capability, where it's reaching into the feature service to grab an attribute and putting it on your survey form. This is possible to do. We're just, that's kind of down the road in our roadmap thinking. So.
All right, cool. We just got a follow-up question from John about a specific situation he's had with a GPS. John, that's question is complex enough that I'd like to take it offline. I do want to get you an answer for that, but it's just pretty complex and very specific for this audience. So let's stay in touch on it after the session. Another question is, sorry, I just moved. Can I automatically calculate areas of polygons and have them show up in the form?
Yes,
so I've got a polygon that I've collected. I need to get the area of the polygon, and I need that to show up in a form somewhere. Can I do that?
Yes, we have some things that we've incorporated recently with data events and calculation fields, 2 features in Fulcrum that let you do kind of advanced, either expression-based automatically populated data. So something like an area, you don't want, I assume you mean like it's automatically computed and inserted, not someone's typing it in from a measurement.
That's what
Yeah, calculation field would do that. And we have something called a library called turf.js that we've integrated that there's documentation in our documentation library with how to use it. And I think we even have examples for how to do these exact things like length, area, like some basic functions. And then what then happens is it's automatically updated. So if I have a shape and it's computed and inserted the area, if I go change that shape, it'll update the area that it calculates.
Cool. This one comes from Paul. I'm not sure if we have enough information to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and let's see what we can suss out. He says he's new to this. Is this something that we can do landscape irrigation maps with that would include the square footage that we can use for water conservation, et cetera? And I'm raising it because I know that we are doing a lot of water engineering and stuff like that right now, and I don't know anything directly about landscape irrigation maps, though. Can you think of any? Is there a good response to that at the moment, Coleman?
Not that I can think of, because I'm not sure I totally understand the nature of the question, but I'd love to talk more about it. If you would want to connect offline and see if we can better answer the question.
Okay, I'm capturing email addresses as I go along for people that we're going to be talking to, and you'll get an email from us. That's Paul, and great. And the only other question I've got right now, so you've got time, if you want to ask more questions, feel free. The only other question I've got in the hopper right now is, can I reach out to ArcGIS or other third-party services to get the closest point on a parcel of land to where I am now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the general answer is that with the same features around data events and calculations that I talked about, within that, now this assumes you're internet connected, because it's going to have to make a call to the internet to do something. You can call any third-party API that you have access to and make calls and bring back data and then incorporate them into your form. So one of the things, we have customers that do this now, is run like geospatial queries based on the data that they've already collected. So I'm in the field, I'm standing here, it's got a lat lon on the point that I'm standing on, which means Fulcrum can then use that latitude, longitude, send it out to like ArcGIS and return with a like polygon that it's within from another data set or something like that, a spatial query. And it can do that in real time. So what's nice about that is you can hit an API that's returning dynamic data. Data could be updating all the time in some other resource, and Fulcrum doesn't need to know about it until right when it is being collected, right? But the caveat is you do have to be connected to do that kind of thing from the field.
Sure. I'd like to point out a reference too, if I may. I got to figure out if I can share my screen again.
I probably have to unshare.
Yeah, if you could just. So what I would just, there's a resource out there that everybody should know about. If you don't, like, I'm a marketing guy. So I don't know anything hard. I don't do anything hard because I don't know anything hard, as I like to say. So hopefully you're seeing the developer information screen right now.
Yep.
So if you go to docs.fulcrumapp.com, this is where you're going to find a lot of developer information, including these developer guides. And one of my favorite places is the calculations reference, because it gives you a view into all of the different kinds of things that we can do within a calculated field. And we just added a whole ton of things based on turf. And one of those, the thing that sparked me coming out here was one of those is geometry nearest point or nearest point online. I don't know enough about turf to speak intelligently to this, but it'll give you the way to do the calculations and examples and stuff like that. So I recommend, if you have an interest in doing something that is maybe a little bit outside of what you do just by clicking checkboxes in Fulcrum, come out to this reference, take a look at the calculations reference, and also look at these calculations examples. The examples, like for example, one of my favorite things to do is to plug weather in. I always figure that you don't want somebody in the field to be typing in the fact with two thumbs, typing in the fact that it's sunny and it feels okay outside, right? That like you want to know what the weather is like. And most places have some kind of a weather station next to them. So somewhere in here, there's I'll probably do it this way, weather. Nope, not getting it here. one of the things that you know what, because it's not a calculations reference, it's in a data event example, adding the current weather. There's a bunch of different examples that are given for calculations and for data events so that you can do things like call a weather service. In this case, weather API is the example we use, but it's the same thing for any API that you might want to call. And then when you load a record for the first time or create a record for the first time, it'll grab your latitude and longitude, make a call out to weatherapi.com and bring back the conditions, the weather, the humidity, the general conditions, cloud cover, all that kind of good stuff. And when you do that, you've got really rock solid data that comes from a local weather station instead of, like I said, some guy typing with 2 thumbs. So if you're interested in doing, we've had a couple of conversations about calculations, we've had a couple of conversations about reaching out to different kinds of systems. I really highly recommend you go to docs.fulcrumapp.com and look at some of this documentation to find some of the just a ton of things that are extremely helpful in common situations, and they're up here in part because people have said, hey, this would be really useful. So we go out and we look at it and say, yeah, that would be useful, and create an example. So worth going to take a look at. And actually, there's another good one that might be worth looking at, query Esri REST services, right? So if you're trying to reach out to Esri specifically, here's an example of doing so.
Yep,
Anyway.
that page is exactly the example that we talked about, actually.
Cool.
Shows an example of that.
All right, that's all I've got there. And now,
yeah, those are great. The examples are great because they give you a good sense for what can be done. And then
yep.
a lot of times what I find is there's something that you want to do, and one of the examples is really close and just needs a slight modification, and it's mostly already there, and you can bring it over and just make tweaks to it versus having a blank canvas to work from. It's very nice for that.
Yep. Got a question here about is it possible to generate a batch of PDF reports only? This person is tracking dump truck loads and gives them a weekly report, and it would be great just to send the PDF reports instead of the Excel files. I'm thinking the export here, Coleman. I don't know about you, but you can export the PDF.
Yeah, the exporter allows you to do that, where it generates a report for each record, each individual record. And that's something that, so we have another more dynamic and more, I guess, modern downloader tool that's inside the map interface that I was looking at, that we're going to be adding the batch support to that down the road, but you can still do that in the exporter today. So from the main apps page, if you go to export on the app in question, you should be able to, there's a checkbox there that says include PDF reports that should let you do that.
Cool. And then got a question. This is coming from John again, and I think this is fairly specific, and I think we're talking about something we'd have to arrange for. How would you set up the weather if you only needed it periodically, like in the morning or the afternoon, then for every record? There's probably multiple ways to handle that, doing the call at one point and then having that as a reference somewhere, setting that as a reference point in like a linked record or something, maybe, Coleman. There's probably multiple ways to skin that cat. So John, maybe that's something, again, just talk to customer success about, and we can figure out what would make the most sense for you and your organization. For me, just thinking off the top of my head, I'd probably do the call once or twice a day and stick the results of that call into a record that then is linked in to the other app.
Yeah.
We're about out of time, and we're basically out of questions. So I think that the timing is good to call it a halt. I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming out today. We know you had other stuff you could have done with the time, and we appreciate you spending that time here. Coleman, thank you very much. I show stuff and talk a lot, but you actually have to do a lot of work to make this stuff happen. So thanks very much for showing off.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake.
Absolutely. And thank you all. Have a great day, rest of your day.